So I've spent the last week on these specialised tyres. We've got the Eliminator T7, T9 grid gravity. So it's their hardest casing, thickest casing, which is definitely a thick casing. It's quite, feels a little bit harsh, feels a little bit woody, not terrible. Butcher gravity grid or grid gravity T9, so their softest compound rubber. The T7 T9 on the Eliminator is the T9 on the sides. Ooh, so it's T9 on the edges, so fairly soft, and then a T7 in the middle. Now that T9 definitely feels soft, but it's not. I don't think it's max grip soft, definitely not. So when you're coming through, I've been riding it in a few different places, so Waterfall Gully mainly, and hit a few laps of brownies today on it, so loose, dusty, kind of powdery, gravelly corners in spots, cutties on the fire trails and whatnot. So I spent a bit of time with the Eliminator at the back, a couple of climbs. I did a climb test comparison yesterday, so I swapped the Eliminator off and put the Aggressor back on. So this is Aggressor with a Aggressor double down casing with a cush core in it. So the cush core is about 260 grams, I think, 250, and the tyre itself's 11 or 1150. So you're looking at 1350 to 400 for that tyre, 1400 for that tyre, that setup. The Eliminator comes in at 1320 grams. So weight for weight, they're the same, more or less. If anything, maybe the Aggressor's pushing a little bit heavier with the cush core in it. But the Eliminator grips up really, really well. Heaps and heaps and heaps of control under braking, steering. Everything feels good on the Eliminator. It's just a little bouncy and a little hard, and it's definitely slow. So it's a slow tyre to climb on. I did the lap climb left, which I'm usually doing at about 17 minutes, high 16s, low 17s on most bikes. When I swapped this, I've got a baseline set up for this bike with the other shock on it, which was 1654, I think I did. Standard amount of effort, standard climb, and that was with a DHF front, max grip DHF, and the Aggressor on the back. So with the Butcher and the Eliminator grid, I went 1836 on the same climb, so very slow, and it just felt like a slug. It felt like I was working against that back tyre the whole way up, and I thought maybe they're both slow, maybe it's just the one. It felt, I was getting the feeling that, because at the start I just put the Butcher on and bounced around the streets and had a suss and thought, yeah, it doesn't really feel like it slowed me down. And then when I put the Eliminator on the back from the Aggressor, that's when it instantly felt slow. So climb was slow, descending was okay. It didn't really feel slow on the descent, but it definitely felt slow on the climb. So with this swapped out, I did a 1725, I think it was yesterday. So it's a good minute 15 or minute 10 at least faster with the Aggressor on the back than the Eliminator. So definitely no go for me on that Eliminator, even though the control is just killer. I love the braking. You're under brakes, it doesn't step out, it doesn't get wily, it just feels like you don't have the brakes on at all, like you've just got that maximum control of no braking. But heaps and heaps of power to brake on as well. So very impressed with that. Just a bit slow for me for trail riding. So if it's going on your gravity bike, it doesn't really matter. But if it's going on a bike that you're climbing up the hill, I don't think you'll enjoy it that much. The Butcher grid gravity. Now I've got I kind of want to put this one on the back and give it a crack. On the front, it feels really, really good. The turn in on these Butchers is killer. So when you're coming into, when you're coming into corners and stuff, or you're cutting lefts and rights, you can cut a further turn, you can cut a sharper turn with these Butchers. So these knobs make it feel, it feels a lot like the Mazda. It feels a lot like the Vittoria Mazda. So the Vittoria Mazda, I only did them in the trail casing, and it was quite bouncy, but kind of compliant. Grip was really, really good. The rubber was just a little harder than I would have liked, but really, really fast tyre. They are such a fast tyre. So this, on the hard downhill runs at Brownies today, and on Twisted Gum, it feels killer everywhere, but I just don't think the rubber's soft enough. I think it's when you kind of pushing on the edge through especially gravelly turns, it just slides across it, whereas the Max Grip will bite a little bit better and give you that feeling of secure even though you're sliding. This, when it's sliding, you can tell the rubber's a little bit harder. So probably a really, really good back tyre. Really good front tyre for a trail bike. If you like, if it's I'd say it's Max Terra. I'd say it's pretty well a Max Terra. So excellent grip, but when you're really, really looking for that bite on the ground, it's not quite there. So never had any issues with it really washing, but it feels like it's gonna wash. It feels like I can't put all the load on it because it will just step if I'm light on weight and it's a gravelly turn, and I just won't get that grip back. So that's the only downside. Braking performance is excellent. We'll see how the braking performance is when we go on the back. Chuck it on the back and see how it goes. But 1,300 grams or 1,310, I think this one weighed in at. A little bit harsh. The casings on these grid gravities are a little bit harsh to me. So versus saying that, I haven't ridden a downhill casing for a little while on the Maxis. So, but they're quite supple. My experience with those downhill casings is they're fairly supple. They're obviously harsher than an EXO and harsher than a double down, but they're quite supple. So I think these are a little bit harsher and a little bit bouncier. Definitely a little harsher. You feel more through the trail with this tyre than you do on any of the Maxi tyres. So the tread pattern gets an absolute yes for me. The tread pattern is killer. Maybe in the grid casing, so not the grid gravity, would be wicked. So maybe a T9 grid up front would be killer, and then out the back a Butcher T9 gravity for more protection. But then your 1,300 grams and a Cush core. Again, going back to the harshness, for me to get rid of the harshness on the front here, I'm running it at 20 psi, and it's still a little bit stabby. 19 felt good, but I ran 20 to avoid burping. So it's just a little bit stabby still. It's good. It is good. It's hard for me to say that I don't like this tyre because I love it. I think it's really, really good. But it just has the weakness of that harsh casing, and maybe a tiny little bit hard on the rubber. Maybe the T9, they could have gone like a T10 or maybe a T11 would be super soft. But they're soft. They are definitely. There's no doubt. It's a soft compound. But like I said, it's probably a Max Terra, not a Max Grip. So running less pressure out the back. So with the Eliminator, I was running it at 22. Yeah, from my usual 25, which is Cush core and Aggressor. 25 psi feels good. To get that same suppleness, I was running that at 22 psi, which I ended up touching the rim a couple of times because I didn't run the Cush core in there. So that low pressure to get rid of the chop in the casing leads to more risk of denting your rim on a hard impact. So you'd want to run a Cush core which brings it up to 1,500 grams, or at least a Cush core XC or some sort of a rim packed or a light tyre insert to give yourself a bit of protection if you are going to run them. But I like them, but they don't overthrow the DHF. They turn better than DHF. They turn in like sharper. What I'm going to do from here, I'm going to chuck the DHR2 double down casing on the front. So I'll stay away from the DHF for a bit and just kind of flatten out my thoughts, and then when I get back on it, I can see what's going on there compared to the double down DHR2 Max Grip that's about to go on there, and then the Max Grip Assegai, which I said I was going to do a while ago, but spent a couple of rides on different bikes with Assegais, and just I can see myself crashing on an Assegai. I can see that front end disappearing on me. So just on the edge, it just when you're on the edge, killer grip all over the Assegai except for on the edge, and then it just goes out she goes, and you end up eating some dirt sangers. So Butcher T9, yeah, it's killer, but it's not there. I can't get past the little bit harsh casing, and I'd like a little bit more security on the rubber, a little softer rubber. So is what it is, but they're killer. Maybe if I ran them for ages, I'd get used to them and go, oh, these tyres are the best. But I don't think so. I just don't think they're quite. They're not quite the old Butcher SX. So back in the day, the Butcher SX had a tough casing, but it wasn't choppy. It was supple, and that was the tyre. That was the Butcher SX from back in the day. The 2010 style was killer, and then they changed their rubber and changed their whatever. But yeah, great, but not a 10 out of 10. I'd probably give them an 8. If the Minion DHF is a 9 out of 10, these are an 8. Yeah, so these are real close, but they turn better. They do turn better. So I think out the back it's going to be killer. But again, harsh casing, lower pressure, more risk of rim damage. So take that for what it is, and do your thing. They're not expensive either. I got this one for $70. The back one was $110, so the Eliminator's up there in price with everything else. But anyway, enough ranting. Ride your bike.